All right, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have some microphones in the room, do we? Do we have some handheld microphones? Who would like to tell us what they've decided should be on the list? We will take 2 or 3 very quickly. This lady down here in the front. Say who you are and just tell us the best idea.
Thank you. My name is Annelies van den Berg from Plan Netherlands. And we actually had a very interesting discussion, and we were far not finished, but it was about like how to align the national legislation with the international, like the SDGs, with the framework. And we talked about inheritance and land titles for women. But
okay, that's good enough. Thank you very much. 1 or 2 more very quickly over there. Can you pass the microphone? And we'll take one over there.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Johannesson. I'm from the County Council of Värmland in Sweden. And we were discussing about the importance of mainstreaming. It's really important to really look into every decision making, every agenda. Is it gender equal? That's really important, we thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we had one more over there somewhere. Yes.
Hello, my name is Jenny Cholm from the House of Lords in the UK. I'm chair of our all-party parliamentary group on population development and reproductive health. Sorry to be boring. And I'm president of the European Parliamentary Group on the same subject. The 3 issues I have down as absolutely crucial to women and development are called family planning, and family planning. Because women cannot do anything until they have control of their own fertility and the number of children they have. Because that affects the economy, their personal economy and the national economy, and it affects their personal health. So it is absolutely basic, and I want to see money going into it. More money, please. Not just talk, not just waffle, but money going into that essential, simple provision.
Very good. Thank you very much. We've set the tone for what I hope will be a very practical conversation with this panel. Our title is actually on the economic side, Empowering Economics, Enabling an Environment Conducive for Full Participation of Women. On the panel, we have Lilianne Ploumen, who is Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation of the Netherlands, Lapo Pistelli, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs in Italy and Minister for International Cooperation, Sofia Sprechmann, who's Programme Director for CARE International, Cathy Pieters, who is in charge of the Cocoa Life Programme, the Director of the Cocoa Life Programme in Mondelēz International, which, among other brands, owns Cadbury's in the UK, I think. And Federica Ortalli, who's a member of the board in the Milan Chamber of Commerce. Now, I want this to be an interactive session, so I've asked each of the panelists only to speak for 5 or 6 minutes at the beginning to open up the conversation with each other and with you. We're going to ask 2 or 3 of them to speak, and then perhaps we'll get a couple of comments from the audience to keep the conversation going so you're not sitting listening for the whole time. When you come to speak, my request to you in the audience is not to ask a question, but to say something interesting in not more than 90 seconds. Stand up, say who you are, be completely fascinating, and then sit down again. That is the way we would like to run it. And the same goes for all of you. Please be completely fascinating. And Lilianne, we'll start, if we may, with you.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to you all. Good to be here. Thank you very much to the Latvian presidency for organizing this event, because I think it's very important that we sit together, talk, and then, most important of all, decide on actions. Now, I will also speak about actions that we have taken on the part of the Dutch government, but also together with NGO partners and other government partners, actions that we have taken to make sure that women can be economically empowered, economically independent. And of all the issues that have been mentioned here, there's not one that is more important than others, I would suggest. I would suggest that we need to work on all of them, and I would like to thank people in the audience who have been doing that for quite some decades, and that's why we made some progress, because some of us were able to stand up, speak up, and change the lives not only of themselves and their daughters, but also of other women. So thank you very much, and in that kind of attitude, I think we need to proceed when we look at the challenges that are still ahead of us. Focusing on economic empowerment, I think there's 3 issues that are really key. One is a change of attitude. It has also already been mentioned. Women have to be acknowledged as key actors in relation to economic growth. They have to be acknowledged by key stakeholders, but they also have to step up themselves and create a domain for themselves. Don't be shy. That's what I tell women entrepreneurs, but also women in university, but also women who are in the workforce. Don't be shy. Ask for a decent salary. Ask for a promotion. Believe in what you yourself have to offer. So that's one, attitude. The other is that we need to recognize that we need collective action. So we need to be self-assured on an individual level, and we need to be organized on a collective level. Organize yourself in trade unions, organize yourself in cooperatives, organize yourself in women's organizations, because collectively you have a stronger voice. And third, and here I will spend a few more words on, is make sure that we have enough resources available to make women's economic empowerment possible. Now, that is, I would say, the least complicated of all the challenges that we face. It's the least complicated because it just means freeing up resources that are already there and make them work for women. What we've been doing in the Netherlands, and I just wanted to share that with you, so maybe you can take that as an example of how you can work in your own governments or your own institutions. We have freed up resources to enable women's organizations to collectively take action. We've called that FLOW, a women's leadership program, and it has enabled many women's organizations throughout the years to stand up and fight for rights, also economic rights. Secondly, we freed up resources for individual women who want to be entrepreneurs. In what we call the Dutch Good Growth Fund, we freed up resources up to 30% for women entrepreneurs in my own country, but also in developing countries. Many mainstream financial institutions shy away from funding small and medium enterprises, and they shy away from freeing up resources for small and medium enterprises run by women, although we all know that women entrepreneurs are even more successful than male entrepreneurs. They are not risk averse, but they are risk sensitive, and they're very rational entrepreneurs. So look at your own institutions, your own mechanisms to fund entrepreneurship, and make sure that there's enough and at least a minimum percentage available for women. And thirdly, we are now working on a pooled fund with the private sector. If we want women to be economically empowered, that of course takes individual and collective action from women themselves, but it also needs awareness from the private sector that they have a key role to play when it comes, for example, to labor condition for women in the garment industry in Bangladesh. But not only there. So we are talking now with large multinationals to see if they can pool fund with us to engage with women organizations for lobbying and advocacy on issues of women's rights in the labor force and for women as entrepreneurs. So this is where I would like to leave it, Simon, because I think, again, that it's good to talk and sit together, but that we need to share good examples of how we can translate word into action. Thanks.
I love the emphasis on collective action. Do you ever find people in developing countries saying to you, excuse me, Minister, mind your own business, because actually this is deep in our culture and gender relations are not for you to intervene?
Well, I've been working on women's empowerment for the larger part of my life, and many people know that. So if there's some people who would suggest such a thing, I don't think they dare and tell it to me. And actually, no, people never say that. What women say is that within the framework of their own country, their own family, their own community, they always see many opportunities to empower themselves. I mean, one could say they don't need my advocacy for that, but we're part of an international women's movement, and I think we've overcome all these barriers, like it's, you know, a Western thing, being a feminist. That is long past us. So I think we have to be very assertive and push back on that. Having said that, I can only come up with these good examples and good programs because we are working together within this international movement and we're partnering there. So, and then finally, one can only work with others if you are prepared to acknowledge the problems and the challenges that you have in your own country. Also in my country, the Netherlands, the gender gap is still 17%. Women, on average, still earn 17% less for the same work as men. I mean, so I have an issue here myself, so I need all the help from women everywhere that I can get to solve that issue.
Very good. That's a very convincing answer. Thank you. Lapo.
This one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. We have been told to be very brief, so I'll be very brief, even though I would be tempted to look for some male solidarity because I'm the only man sitting in the panel. I'll give you just some bullet points. The first one, I would like recollecting some basic messages that we received also from the previous opening statement. The first one, looking from where we are coming, it seems to me that, I mean, a good job has already been done. I don't remember whether this was in your background paper, I read it, or in some OECD data that I read this morning or yesterday. But the amount of ODA devoted to gender equality, gender issue from 2002 has tripled. So I understand that there's still a problem because this gender ODA is targeted on women initiative only for a very minor part. We are talking about 2% in terms of social economic empowerment. The rest is mainstreaming. But it seems to me that the message, I mean, didn't break through, but we are at a good point. Secondly, second message, because the UN man was talking about the Sustainable Development Goal number 5. Look, he mentioned, if I'm not wrong, that there are some goals, but if you read the goals, it's about no discrimination, no violence, no harmful practices, no unpaid care and domestic work, full and effective participation to all levels, reproductive health and sexual right. So you see one point, which seems to me very interesting, and it's so hard to say in a very effective way after the straightforward talk that we listened from the former president of Latvia. Women are still perceived most of the times as part of a vulnerable group. And in many documents, you will always find women with children, women and children, women and children. So it's true, but you focus women only in this frame of being vulnerable, not being key actor of our society. So I would like very much to move the narrative, first of all. Yes, women in some cases are the most vulnerable, but they are not only a vulnerable group. So you have to move from this frame, which can be a trap for most of them. Third point, so you need to work on the social norms and political restriction and so on. And from this point of view, I would like to split in two parts my point. The first one, we are here in Europe. We are all coming from European countries. This is an EU event. Look, in our society, we have to do a lot. We have to do a lot. We can preach somewhere else, but first of all, we have to do our homework. And it seems to me, I'm talking, referring to my country, to Italy, but just to give an example, we are trying to overcome a long and bumpy economic crisis, but in years of economic crisis, the first the first workers to be kicked out are women in time of crisis. So it's the weak ring of the chain. And this is about, secondly, this is about same salary for the same job, and it's not only about Europe. Pay attention for a while to the series of the State of the Union speeches from the US president. In the US, having the same salary for the same job is still a fight that has to be fought, and the US president is still fighting for that. So there's a long way to go, not only in the south of the world, but also in our societies, in our country. It's quite true that if you go to the other part of the world, maybe there's a longer way to go, I understand. And if I can interact with Lilianne on how you engage societies and government when you have problems in terms of social norms, I understand that maybe it's about the kind of human touch that you can have while dealing with them. I'll give you two examples. And this is not about economic empowerment. It's about no discrimination, no violence. Italy has a lead, as a well-acknowledged lead in projects concerning female genital mutilation. And I understand in the very first years we were dealing with this project, the tendency was, I'll dictate you how to behave. And there was a failure. We started with a bottom-up. We restarted again with a bottom-up process involving local authorities, trying to understand better the normative mindset of their culture. And believe me that these projects now are succeeding in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa, and in Western Africa, because we tried not to have a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach. And a second example comes from Palestine, from Bethlehem, where we have a safe shelter that we gave then to local authorities, which is about women being victims of violence, domestic violence, and not only domestic violence. Yes, it's a safe shelter. Some of them spend there 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 6 months, and then they go back home or they change their home. But the 50% of the project is not only about dealing with the women, but dealing with local police, parents, neighbors, so all of those who created a social environment, a political environment that made the violence happen. So it's about engaging the local context. If we're not going to be too much patronizing with them, it could work. Finally, we are ready to cope with a new commissioner in engaging with the new gender action plan. There's a lot of things that have to be done. But allow me to spend one final sentence on economic empowerment. I'll be very blunt, especially focusing on African societies. If you deal with women empowerment in African societies, you do a triple job with one action, because on one hand you focus on extreme poverty, and that's good, but we all know that in many African societies, women are the cornerstone of the family and of a society, so if you empower women, you have a double empowerment, if I may say so. And thirdly, it's sustainable. At the end of the day, it's a sustainable model. So I'm sorry to say, I wouldn't like to be hurting, that Latvia is not attending Expo 2015 this year in Milano, which is Feeding the Planet Energy for Life. But there will be a couple of weeks between June and July, especially devoted to women empowerment, Women for Expo, and a special project which will be cross-cutting with all 140 countries attending the Expo. because we do believe that, especially in food security, in food nutrition and so on, the role of women is fundamental, also in order to achieve a sustainable model. So let me end with a sound bite that maybe you know. You will all remember, I hope not to be too old to do that, the Bob Marley songs, No Woman, No Cry. So if we could reverse the title, it's about no woman, no growth. If you don't involve women in this economic model, there won't be any growth. So, it's a double agenda. Women can be the cornerstone to achieve it.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm going to call Sofia in just a second. I hope you'll be able to say something about this balance between technocratic projects, local organisation and women's collective action, because that seems to be an interesting area. And when Sofia has spoken, I'm just going to go to the audience just for 2 or 3 very quick examples. So while you're listening to Sofia, just please think about whether you can help us identify 1 or 2 really good practical cases that you can describe in 90 seconds that we can then add to our portfolio of possible interventions. Sofia.
Thank you very much, Simon. With International Women's Day just less than a week away, it is of course very important to talk on this panel about women's economic empowerment, as it is of course always important to talk about women's economic empowerment. I want to make a few points based on our experience from CARE International on women's economic empowerment, which is actually one of our highest priorities of our programs. So I will talk from that experience and, as we have been asked to do, about what works. And maybe the first point I want to make in that regard, the very first point, and probably the main point, is that economic empowerment of women is much more than economic advancement, such as more income or more jobs for women. A woman is only economically empowered when social and economic systems and structures support her ability to succeed. And she has the power to make and act on economic decisions on a level playing field with men. This is actually a very, very important point, because it is about looking beyond the conventional economic indicators, beyond, for example, counting how many women have formal jobs or how many increase their income. It is about women's voice and control of their own income, decisions, assets in the households, in the family, in the community. If we have this outlook of really looking at economic empowerment beyond those conventional indicators, immediately we have addressed non-economic factors of economic empowerment. For example, a woman's economic empowerment is restrained by her ability to play certain roles or gender-based violence in the household. Therefore, that constrains her access to opportunities. So, while we are talking about women's economic empowerment, we really have to look at all factors, and many have been mentioned today already, that constrains women's ability to empower herself economically. Indeed, we should define women's economic potential and the realization of women's economic rights as a combination of supporting women to access and benefit from economic opportunities. So what we have conventionally talked about, like increased income, access to markets, skills, training, opportunities for dignified work. But at the same time, we need to look at the ability of women to make and influence economic decisions at all levels, at absolutely all levels, also at the highest levels, and the control over assets. Now, how do we do this? Of course, for those women that have formal jobs, it is important that these are decent jobs, enabling them to have a dignified work. But we do need to acknowledge that in the developing world, the majority of women are in the informal sector. And therefore, a strong focus on micro-enterprises is key. From our experience at CARE, where we actually work with 4 million women in sub-Saharan Africa, out of 8 million women in sub-Saharan Africa that receive informal finance systems and services through village savings and loans. So we service about half of those participants in sub-Saharan Africa. The main, and from that experience, so what works? From that experience, what women constantly tell us, that one of their main obstacles to their economic empowerment is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is, of course, an enabler, but it is that magic ingredient that allows to move women forward. In fact, today, 2.5 billion people are excluded from the formal financial sector. And about 70% of women-owned businesses in the developing world are either not served or underserved by financial services, representing a finance gap of about $285 billion. What works? What do we do concretely at CARE? We help women to organize in groups of about 30, 40, 50 women that, based on a savings-led approach, work together and loan each other based on their savings. And we have also understood from our programs that no one is too poor to save. Even women that live on $2 a day are able to save in a year's time about $60. So based on this approach, we move women and connect them, gather them to move from being financially excluded to include them in those saving groups and then move them up from that first rung of the ladder, connecting with partners such as Barclays Bank or Equity Bank in Kenya to connect them to the formal sector, to the formal financial sector. So this is indispensable. That kind of inclusion is indispensable to really make a dent on gender inequality and promote women's economic empowerment. Just very quickly, while donor funding in this context is absolutely critical, because it cannot just be up to women through a savings-led approach. It needs to be also donors like the EU supporting economic empowerment of women, and that is critical. And of course, tracking the empowering impact of those interventions. Women face unique barriers to their economic empowerment. Not only have they traditionally been excluded from the market, they often have been exploited by the market. So informal and formal gender roles need to change. Women's economic empowerment is not linear, but we also have seen that gender roles change perpetually. In fact, gender roles can change, and they must change.
Okay, thanks very much. Would I expect to see CARE campaigning on issues like, FGM, union rights for women, or is your approach more technocratic in terms of working through these interventions like financial inclusion?
Actually, we really address the full spectrum of disempowerment, because as I just have said, and I think that is the point I wanted to stress, is that in order to be economically empowered, we need to address many other barriers and obstacles, and they include precisely issues of reproductive health, of many other spectrums of life. So unless we do that, really, any initiative set out to empower women will be short-lived. And we need to both do it through a bottom-up approach, through organizing women themselves, but also through deeper structural change. And, of course, through policy interventions. Simple things as, for example, governments addressing the financial literacy of women, numeracy, so that you're actually empowered through the education system to be able to take control of your own life. So unless we address empowerment from these very multiple facets and ways, any intervention that is set out to empower women will be short-lived.
Very good, thank you. 2 or 3 quick contributions from the floor, some good examples. Put your hand up if you'd like to contribute. Please. Do we have the microphones? Yes, there's one coming in your direction. There was one behind you first. Yes, you first then, and then we'll come to the front. Say who you are.
I'm Solvitos, and I'm representing University of Latvia and the Latvian Association of Reproductive Rights. I'm very thankful for all speakers, and I fully agree with a lot of sayings, and I would like to add to say that we should first of all look at ourselves and say what I'm as a person doing for advocating women's rights, and what I have been doing in the past and what I can promise to do in future. And I could say that I have met in Latvia a lot of women who are advocating against equality and against women's rights, and there are a lot of women who are participating in female genital mutilation in Africa and so on. I would really look at the personal perspective and personal responsibility for the goals we are talking about. Let's do it.
Very good, thank you very much. At the front here. And then we'll take one over there, and then we'll come to the remaining panelists. Right at the front in the corner.
Yes, good morning.
Would you like to stand up so people can see who you are?
Good morning, everyone. I am the Swedish ambassador for Global Women's Issues and Gender Equality, and also the coordinator of Sweden's feminist foreign policy. My name is Annika Molin Hellgren. I'm going to sit down because I have a few notes that I'd like to just look at before I speak. First of all, thank you very much, Sofia Sprechmann. I understand almost everything you said, and I really agree with your words on a holistic approach and the necessity of it. I'd like to make 3 points this morning. First of all, just to give you a practical example from the Swedish experience, and I think we've reached somewhere with regard to gender equality. For us, women's increased participation in the labor force was paramount, and it was made possible through 3 main reforms: the abolition of the joint taxation system, the expansion of publicly funded affordable child and elderly care, and the reform of the parental insurance. So we created a social acquis that everyone embraced, and it's beyond any ideological view today in Sweden. The second thing I'd like to say is that it's very important that we put our money where our mouth is, and with regard to the EU development cooperation and our GAP, our Gender Action Plan, we can see that we committed to putting 75% to gender-sensitive activities. However, we achieved only 28%. So there's a lot of work to be done at the EU level with regard to where resources go. And the third point I'd like to make, and it's in line with what Sofia Sprechmann said, access to justice in order to combat gender-based violence. If we don't reach anywhere with regard to gender-based violence, it will be very difficult to go forward on the other issues. So I'd really like to put that forward on the agenda today, access to justice. Thank you.
That's very helpful, thank you. Is there anybody over here? I'm just looking at geographically this side for a second. Then we'll take one very quick contribution. Please, can you be really brief, because I want to come back to the panel.
Good morning. My name is Marius Wanders. I'm representing World Vision, but I also represent Concord Europe, the Confederation of Development NGOs. I have a suggestion to make. You wanted a fascinating suggestion. Here's one. At least I hope it's fascinating. Calling for more development funding to go to empower women by, for instance, giving them financial inclusion is very good. But I think the EU has an instrument which it's probably not yet using to its full potential, and that's the European Investment Bank. The European Investment Bank is, after all, an investment bank. So it is in the game of making investments and making a return on investment. And it can support microcredit facilities in a way that goes beyond what normal development assistance given by the EU could do. Yeah. So perhaps the EU could examine how to improve, let's say, the access that microcredit providers who particularly favor women and for their economic empowerment, how those microcredit institutions can have more access to the funds that are available within the European Investment Bank.
Very good, thanks very much. I mean, this is a really fascinating discussion, the importance of this not being seen as a developing country problem, but a shared problem, the importance of not just focusing on technocratic interventions, but thinking about the social. But I also like very much this idea that, you know, there's no point in saying to women, go out to work if you haven't got the basic infrastructure for childcare in place, which leads us back to the points made earlier by Jenny Tong about reproductive health and so on. Cathy, as you struggle with the cocoa supply chain, you must confront all these issues. Would you like to tell us about it?
Hello, yes. Hi, thank you very much for inviting me to speak, to join your panel. I'm very excited. You might be the only man on this panel, but I'm the only industry person, I think,
well,
maybe even in the room. Sorry?
Your neighbour is probably private sector, right?
So that's really exciting. I am excited also to be here because just as many of you, I'm passionate about women empowerment and truly believe that women are key in sustainable development. So I work for Mondelēz now. I have to do a lot of things at the same time, but hey, I can multitask. Yay. I work for Mondelēz International. You might not have heard of us, but you probably heard and even tasted many of our lovely products. We are indeed the largest biscuits and chocolate maker in the world. We sell a lot of these iconic European brands that you mentioned Cadbury's earlier, but we also have Toblerone, Milka, Belvita, Lu, biscuits, all of those. Now, I, in Mondelēz, lead the Cocoa Life program. And Cocoa Life program is really grown or born out of Mondelēz's recognition of a key challenge at the heart of our business. It's really very simple. Without cocoa, there is no chocolate. But also without the next cocoa farmer generation, there is no cocoa. So we definitely can't take the next generation of cocoa farmers for granted. There's a lot of challenges in the cocoa farming environment. And to start with, 90% of the cocoa is grown by smallholders, who sometimes are really very small holders. And often they don't have, well, we talked a lot about it, access to financial services, but also very simply, they don't know the yields that they would need to be lifted out of poverty. They mainly all live under the barrier of poverty. They also lack a lot of knowledge of the modern farmer techniques. So a lot of challenges in that area. This is why we have the ambition as an industry to create empowered, thriving cocoa communities. And we want to do that at scale. And I think that is one of the things that we can bring as an industry partner. We have a huge supply chain that goes out there. If you count all the people included in there, that brings quite some scale. Because our ultimate goal as a company is to source all our cocoa sustainably, mainly from Cocoa Life, from the program. And to achieve that, we are investing at least $400 million to empower 200,000 farmers by 2022. Now, with Cocoa Life, we have been directly involved on the ground with the cocoa communities for 6 years now. So we've learned a lot about the drivers of sustainable development. Our experience is clearly, and I mean, you all confirmed this, but gender equality benefits all. And women empowerment is just essential in the cocoa, for the cocoa communities to thrive. So with our ambition, we would not end up anywhere if women empowerment was not a key driver of our program. Now, there is a lot to be done. I'm not going to go too long. I know I have to be quick, but just to understand, in Ghana, 70% of cocoa comes of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, just two countries. In Ghana, women earn about 30% less than men. In Côte d'Ivoire, I'm talking about cocoa farming environment, cocoa workers. In Côte d'Ivoire, that goes up in some places until 70%. So there's a lot to do. To tackle all of this, and together with some of our strategic partners, our NGO partners on the ground who bring the expertise, we have pulled together strategic plans, gender action plans. These gender action plans, they have tangible interventions that our implementing partners, NGOs, our suppliers, will then implement on the ground in the cocoa communities. A few examples, so we, for example, do implement the VSLA that you were talking about and see incredible results out of that, the village savings and loans associations that Sofia was talking about. But the main thing also is whenever there are trainings, whether it's technical trainings on farming or vocational trainings, we always ensure that we are deliberate about inclusiveness, and that means different detailed things, but it has to do with scheduling the timings. Just make it happen for women when they have time. Also make sure that they have women groups so that they feel comfortable joining and even attending. And for that, for example, we have a program where we include women extension officers, so a lot of the people going out there to the communities would be women. Which all of a sudden opens doors and gives an easier access for women to join the trainings. Well, so many other examples, but I'll say one word about the fact we are a business. So we approach everything with a business angle and need to look how our investments have the biggest impact. And in this case, the biggest impact for the women in the cocoa communities, which is why we've developed a framework around the whole of Cocoa Live program, including 10 global KPIs. These KPIs, some of them are specifically looking at women empowerment. For example, we have one specific KPI out of the 10 that would look at an increase of women playing a key role in the community. That's one part. Many of the KPIs look at a differentiation between men and women. The results would be disaggregated between men and women so that we can see, for example, net income is one KPI, but we can really look at what's happening with the men, what's happening with the women separately. These KPIs are tracked by Harvard research team on the ground and reported back to us. So we will have an independent view on how we're progressing on our KPIs.
Cathy, I'm sorry to rush you, but...
Yeah. I'll just finish on this, because these are some of the powerful women in cocoa. One, at the bottom right here, you see Madame Fanny in Côte d'Ivoire. She typically is a person who has been completely empowered by the program because she didn't have the structure to bring all her good thoughts to practice. So we really helped her develop a cooperative. She's now leading one of the powerful cocoa farming cooperatives with many farmers, men and women included in the cooperative. And so it's great to see her empowered.
All right, good, thank you. I'm really sorry to push you, but Federica, let's go straight to you.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure for me to be here with you. And the next 5 minutes, and I hope I will stay within the 5 minutes, I will talk about our experience in promoting women economic empowerment in Central Asia. I will talk about our 6 international cooperation projects financed by European Union. But first of all, let me briefly tell you about us. I represent the Milan Chamber of Commerce, which is a public institution.
Sorry.
With 300,000 active and registered enterprises, and those enterprises owned by women are the 24% of the overall national total. So Formaper, it's a special agency within the Chamber of Commerce, and Formaper, with its International Relations Bureau, is active in supporting sustainable economic and social development in more than 35 countries, and we've done roughly 90 international cooperation projects. So over the past years, we've worked on 6 international cooperation projects financed by the European Union, 3 projects in Uzbekistan, 1 in Kazakhstan, 1 in Kyrgyzstan, and 1 was a multi-country project, always in Central Asia. All the projects have the same set of measures: empower vulnerable groups of women, unemployed women and youth, low-income families in urban and rural areas, women victims for different forms of gender discrimination, such as domestic violence, human trafficking, ex-convicts. So just to give you a few numbers, we have started in 2008, and up to date we have created 23 women help desks, 3 training work laboratories, and I'm talking about a pastry laboratories, a sewing laboratory, and a computer lab. And what do the women do in the lab? They first get trained and they acquire skills and profession, and second, they have new job places, maybe created thanks to agreements with the civil society, with the local authorities. And in the meantime, while they work outside, while they are employed or they are a startup businesswoman, they can still continue to use the facilities. We also created 2 business centers for agricultural producers. We've trained 120 people that they will be responsible for the women help desk once we leave. We have assisted 13,000 women in various services. But these are numbers, and they are tangible effects, a tangible outcome of our projects. But to effectively assist a woman in her exit process from a difficult life situation, we really should provide a 360-degree assistance, what we call a multi-level integrated approach. First of all, in our multi-level integrated approach, we focus on all the aspects of empowerment. We start from psychological counseling. We go on with legal advice, providing information, training, coaching, mentoring. We help women to find a job, a direct employment, or become empowered, become entrepreneur. And in order to become economically independent and self-sustainable, which is something that we believe, we have to give them the tools to become economically independent. Because in the country where we operate, this is still a challenge, and gender equality is not yet achieved. But I've talked about numbers, I've talked about our integrated approach. There's one crucial factor which is very important, and it's the human factor. It's a human factor that we put when we start thinking about the project. It's a human factor that we use when we train the trainers, the people that will stay and run the Women Help Desk. It's a human factor we need with our tailor-made approach to guarantee privacy and anonymity, to have the women rely on what we're doing, to have the women approach our services, which is very hard at the very beginning. We need the women to trust us in order to offer them all the services. Women are guided step by step, hand in hand, through everything. even through paperwork, to bureaucracy, even when they have to go to the bank to ask for credit. And it's the same human factor that our trained staff need to use when they choose partners to run the services we have based in their country. We could have not been so successful without our international partners, and I will take 30 seconds to thank Marta, which is the Resource Center for Women here in Latvia, Siska from Uzbekistan, and I see my friend here. It's the Civic Initiative Support Center, the Public Fund DIA from Kyrgyzstan, and the LEF from Italy. Their professionalism, hard work, motivation, they put in everyday job, it's a key factor for us to succeed, because we really experience the multiplier effect of the human factor. When a woman experiences our services, is a link of a chain, and then can be a volunteer or a mentor for other women to come. We need role models, we need mentors, we need people that really believe in what we're doing and then can go on and multiply what we have done. And I have to thank the civil networking. Without the civil networking, it's hard to operate in this country. I'm talking about public and private partnerships, state and non-state actors. With our project, we really have tangible effects, which are the numbers that I told you before, but also I'm talking about a whole range of intangible assets. I'm talking about awareness building, talking about gradual change of mentality in the country, and policy adjustments, as well as the creation of needed services that were not there before. So what I can say, what I can ask to the European Union is go on with the funds, because we're doing a good job, all of us here, and we need those funds to go on and to continue. Empowering one woman is about empowering a family, a local mahalla in Central Asia, a village, a community. So it's a link of a chain that will become like a bigger group of women.
Very good, thank you very much. What's so interesting about these cases is that it works. And I actually wanted to pick up something that Cathy said about the importance of measurement as well. But now, Lilianne and Lapo, when we come to the big agencies, which, unlike these more agile, I don't know how agile Mondelēz is compared to Dutch aid, but anyway, the NGOs are possibly more agile than the big bureaucracies. What is it that turns a big bureaucracy into an active agency able to deliver for women? And I'm sure Lindsay Northover will talk this afternoon about the value of a minister who's really committed, and the Girls' Summit and so on. But you're both responsible for turning your agencies round, and we heard from Neven Mimica this morning about the EU. The Gender Action Plan has been quite slow, I think, people recognise in its evaluations. So tell us about changing the bureaucracy. How do you do it?
Oh, well, in the Netherlands, we have a very, very long tradition of focusing on women's rights in our development policy. So I think the credit is due to the people, the women and men who work in that bureaucracy for quite some time, who have been able to drive that, who have been politically supported, but they are the ones who have been doing it. So I'm not going to take credit for changing my own bureaucracy, but I am going to take credit for the leadership also in times when the going gets tough. And in two ways. One is when there's budgetary constraints, and many of the EU member states are facing those constraints in their development budgets. I decided to not cut down on the expenses on reproductive rights for women and women's programs. So that is something that you can do, that also in times when it becomes more difficult and more restrained in terms of budget, make sure that you don't cut down on the resources to women's rights. And the second is I think leadership is also about being able to talk about the more difficult issues. This morning we heard a former president of Latvia talking about sex. I think we don't talk enough about sex, about what it means to girls and women, but also to boys and men. We like to talk about in very technocratic terms, and I think we have to speak out. And when we talk about reproductive rights, which is really jargon, no one in the streets, be it in Amsterdam or in Kinshasa or in Dhaka, knows what that means. But every woman knows what it means to be able to decide for yourself if you want to have sex, with whom you want to have sex, and how often you want to have sex. And I think we need to overcome our shyness also in the political discourse. So for that, I do take credit.
Just while you've got the microphone, and you deserve the credit, I know, just this thing about mainstreaming. I mean, you know, we always used to say, no, we don't need to worry about gender programs because we're going to mainstream gender, and then we don't.
Well, listen, in the women's movement, we had this other word for mainstreaming. We called it male streaming. So I talked to the staff in our office and said, you know, I don't want to be bothered by this concept of mainstreaming. Because I think what it did, instead of redirecting resources, it came up with a new discourse which put us all in sleep. Okay. So having said that, I think we need to do two things looking at what's ahead of us in 2015 to decide on this new universal agenda. We need to have, and it has been mentioned earlier, we need to have targets targeted specifically at changing the lives of women, helping women to change their own lives. And we need to be very alert, I would say, on what opportunities within all those other goals we have to put the women up front. Now, I know in our world it's called mainstreaming, but I try not to use that word because I don't think it's helpful at all.
That's interesting. Lapo.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Very briefly, because you raised a $1 million question. It's not that easy. But I'll tell you just 4 telegrams. The first one, in our guidelines, in our strategic document, gender equality, just a piece of information, is either a standalone goal or a cross-cutting issue which covers many, many different chapters. The second telegram is about our pie is divided, because we deal in our cooperation budget, 75% of resources are given to international agencies and institutions, and less than 25, frankly speaking, 20% is given to bilateral programs. In terms of bilateral programs, women gender equality is one of the main pillars, is among the priorities. And I'm not saying that because I'm attending this conference. You can make a double check on official documents. I mentioned before some programs like the one we have in Palestine, in the Maghreb area, about violence and the FGM, but I would like to mention that in some very delicate countries, I will mention Afghanistan and Senegal. All our projects are devoted to empowering women in terms of economy and jobs. Frankly speaking, I would like to be in the position to be more focused on how money is spent from international organizations, because I will limit myself to say that I fully share your view about the burden of bureaucracy, and I would like to see in terms of NAIC aid, which is the final outcome of this commitment. Third telegram, we did a lot on health and education, but I could come out from this conference being more persuaded that we need to move ahead in terms of economy and jobs, much more than health and education, even though what we have done in health and education is quite remarkable. And finally, this is an open question to the floor, to the Commissioner, to all those who have their hands in the job. We are 5 months from Addis Ababa conference. And because I fully share what she said about financial literacy, so it's not only about microcredit, it's about having the access to the whole range of instruments, I was wondering whether, as a European Union, we could focus on how to shape a financial package which is more women's responsive. Because if we truly believe that women's are a keystone of the whole architecture, even giving or shaping a financial package which is women's responsive could be maybe a good idea.
Very good. I know I'm stealing time because we are now running a little bit late, so I was going to go back to the audience, but we'll hold that. But I want to just go to the remaining panel members. We have 2 more sessions today, and we're focusing on what should be in the 2015 SDG package and what should be in the EU's Gender Action Programme. So if there's one thing you would like the donors to do for you that we could then discuss in a later session, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Federica and work along just in 1 or 2 sentences because I'm afraid we're out of time.
Well, I come from an educational background. I work in education. I run a company which is in the pre-K education, and I've done this for the last 25 years. So I have to say, let's start since the very beginning. Actually, before the very beginning, let's have funds for international cooperation projects to focus on education, training, education from the beginning through your entire adolescence and young adulthood.
Okay, thank you very much. Cathy?
Yes, and I'm of course looking through the cocoa perspective, through my industry lens. But I would say that a big help could be, these topics need to be tackled holistically. There's nothing that can be done individually, it's a whole. And so I would really encourage the support of partnerships, of holistic approaches that tackle all of the different aspects at the same time. At the same time, the other thing I think that would be needed is really focus, choose the battles that are going to make the biggest impact, and make sure that there is an impact reading or an impact agenda. How do I know that I made progress on that impact?
Yeah, and we won't lose your earlier point about measurement, which I'm sure we'll come back to later on. Sofia.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I will state the obvious, but of course it is, I would ask for interventions that really reach the poorest women. It is easier said than done, but we have concrete examples like financial inclusions through savings-led approaches that actually work. And of course, connecting this bottom-up experiences with also structural change. That connection, that bridging is also essential. Where can we find those opportunities for those connections? I would also say that a lot of the interventions for women's economic empowerment are actually very centered on access to financial services, on access to training. We need more interventions which are about women's voice and control of their economic sphere. So I think that would be the other critical comment I want to make, and especially in the post-2015 context, having interventions which are cross-cutting and mainstreaming, but also interventions which are solely focused on the empowerment of women are absolutely essential.
Very good, thank you. Quick vote before we finish for lunch. Have we got a good diagnosis of the problem that we're trying to deal with? Not just describing it, but understanding and explaining the problem. Put your hand up if you think this morning we've had a good diagnosis. And put your hand up if you think we haven't. Okay, then please make sure you speak this afternoon so that we hear what the problem is. Put your hand up if you think we've heard some good potential solutions to the problems that we're trying to deal with. And put your hand up if we haven't. So we've made some good progress with still a few doubters to convince. And now put your hand up if you're optimistic that we're actually going to put these solutions into practice and deliver real change. Put your hand up if you're optimistic. And put your hand up if you're not. Well, I think you've had good success in convincing the audience, but we still have the rest of the day. to try and convince those who are not yet on the right side. I want to remind you, if you're a head of delegation, that you have a photograph in the main hall. There is entertainment, photo action and photo displays and so on. Lunch will be served. You're allowed to attend a press conference if you would like to, but you need to be back here at 2 o'clock sharp for the next panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.